I know how deeply you, the entire nation, and I think I may say the whole world, sympathize with me in the irreparable loss we've all suffered.
King Charles had expected hesitation. He may even have expected resistance. But he never expected his own sister to look directly across the table and reject the plan he believed could secure Camilla's future within the royal family. When Anne delivered her answer, the room fell silent. The king's expression changed, and a private disagreement became a devastating royal rupture. This was not merely a dispute over charity. It was a rejection that struck at the heart of his marriage. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles entered the Windsor meeting convinced his plan would carry the day. The Royal Foundation meeting was a closed gathering where royals reviewed shared charities, and this decision would shape who controlled money, campaigns, and influence across the monarchy. He believed Anne would question the plan, then accept it. Instead, the Princess Royal closed the proposal folder and said the foundation could not become an extension of one household. Camilla did not move. She tightened her fingers around a pen as the meaning settled over her. Her proposal would have made the Queen Consort permanent head of the family's central charitable foundation, placing her above working royals in coordinating causes, distributing patronage funds, approving campaigns, and speaking for the monarchy's charitable work. Charles turned toward his sister and asked whether her decision was final. Anne held his gaze and answered that it was. The silence sharpened. William knew the refusal was coming, and that knowledge made the king's shock more painful. The prince had reviewed Anne's concerns, yet he chose not to warn his father, fearing any appeal would be mistaken for an attempt to undermine Camilla. Charles now felt trapped between the sister he trusted and the son who would inherit everything he was trying to protect. Anne had not arrived with a sudden objection. She placed a prepared memorandum before the king, a written statement explaining how the appointment could weaken the foundation's independence and divide the family into competing households. Charles read the first page, then looked at William. The future king said nothing. Camilla lowered her pen, but her anger remained controlled, because no one dared name it. Charles returned to his private rooms carrying the rejected proposal. He set it on a table without speaking, and stared at the closed cover as though it contained a verdict on his marriage. He believed he had witnessed disloyalty. He did not know Anne's refusal had begun with a deeper confrontation weeks earlier. To understand that choice, everyone standing on either side of the table had to be understood. To Charles, the foundation represented protection. To Camilla, it offered recognition. To Anne, it carried a duty too important to be surrendered for the sake of family peace. Three people entered the dispute with three entirely different visions of loyalty, and none of them believed they were acting selfishly. Yet beneath their formal words lay decades of memory, frustration, sacrifice, and resentment. The battle was not about who cared most. It was about whose version of service would define the crown. Charles had spent years trying to secure Camilla's place beside him. The royal institution was more than the family itself. It was the network of duties, charities, advisors, and traditions that gave every public role its authority. He believed leadership of the foundation would finally give the Queen Consort a position that could not be questioned, reduced, or quietly removed when the balance of power changed. To him, the appointment was not a reward, it was protection. Camilla understood that fear because she carried her own. She had stood beside the king through hostility, suspicion, and endless comparison. Yet part of her still believed she was being tolerated, rather than fully accepted. In a private conversation, she told Charles the foundation could become the first responsibility that was unquestionably hers. He promised that no one would push her aside again. She believed him, and that belief made Anne's rejection feel deeply personal. Anne saw something different. The Princess Royal had devoted much of her life to public service, and she believed charitable leadership had to remain separate from private emotion. Several long-serving patrons had not been consulted about the proposed change, and that omission angered her. She feared her brother was allowing his loyalty as a husband to outweigh his duty as monarch. For her, silence would have been the greater betrayal. William stood between those positions. The prince respected Anne's objections and understood why the foundation's independence mattered, but he also knew that openly opposing Camilla could leave his father feeling abandoned. He feared that Charles would see disagreement not as caution, but as another judgment on the marriage he had spent years defending. That was why the future king remained quiet, even as the tension grew. Sophie became the only person willing to move between them. The trusted confidant spoke separately with Charles and Anne, listening as each described the other's actions as a failure of loyalty. After the meeting, the king asked whether his sister had intended to humiliate him. Sophie paused, then answered that Anne had intended to stop the proposal, not wound her brother. Charles looked away, unconvinced. What he still did not understand was that Anne's refusal had begun with one precise incident at a closed charity ceremony. One gesture, one instruction. One moment that convinced her the foundation was already being reshaped. Weeks before the rejection, the royal family gathered for what should have been an uncomplicated charitable ceremony. There were no angry speeches, no public accusations, and no visible rebellion. Yet during that carefully arranged event, Camilla issued one instruction that Anne could not forget. It lasted less than a minute. Few people understood its importance at the time. But for the Princess Royal, that moment proved the proposed leadership change was not simply about service. It was about control, and the consequences had already begun. Camilla instructed the event secretary to remove Anne's closing remarks from the program and replace them with an announcement naming the Queen as the Foundation's future coordinating leader. The Royal Family Community Foundation was the shared charitable body through which senior royals supported campaigns, managed patronages, and directed funding. That made the change far more serious than a simple adjustment to a speech. It suggested that authority was being claimed before anyone had formally approved it. Anne discovered the alteration only minutes before the ceremony began. She read the revised program once, then again, her expression tightening as she realized her contribution had been erased without consultation. The Princess Royal had not been asked to shorten her remarks or change their focus. Her entire closing address had disappeared. When Camilla approached, she described the decision as a necessary simplification, insisting that the family needed a clearer message. Anne asked one question: had Charles authorized the announcement? Camilla did not answer directly. Instead, the Queen Consort said the foundation required a single voice if it was going to move forward with strength. The response confirmed Anne's suspicion that the change was part of something larger. She folded the program carefully and told her that unity could not be created by erasing people who had spent years doing the work. Sophie witnessed the exchange and understood immediately why it mattered. Later, the trusted confidant spoke privately with Anne and confirmed that Charles had never seen the revised announcement. The king had approved the original ceremony order, not the version naming Camilla as future leader. Sophie's account transformed the incident from a misunderstanding into evidence that the transition was already being advanced without his knowledge. Anne then obtained documented meeting notes from the Queen Consort's private office. Those records showed discussions about reorganizing royal patronages, including moving several responsibilities away from Catherine and Edward once Camilla gained control. The Princess Royal now believed the proposal threatened more than her own position. It could reshape the balance of service across the entire family before anyone had agreed to the change. Late that evening, Anne placed the altered program beside a blank sheet of paper. She began writing her objection by hand, paused over the first sentence, crossed out the word concern, and replaced it with warning. Charles still believed his sister was considering the proposal. In truth, she was deciding how forcefully she would stop it. The confrontation did not begin with shouting. It began with Charles asking his sister to reconsider. Anne looked at him, then at Camilla, and refused. What followed was more painful than an argument, because every sentence remained measured. The king appealed to family loyalty. The Princess Royal answered with duty. The Queen defended her intentions. And within minutes, 3 members of the same family exposed wounds that had been hidden beneath years of ceremony. Charles sat at the head of the Windsor table with Camilla beside him, while Anne faced them across the room. William and Sophie remained between both sides, close enough to intervene but unable to soften what was coming. The king presented the appointment as a stabilizing decision, one that would simplify charitable operations and give the Queen Consort a lasting public mission. The foundation was the family's shared charitable organization, responsible for coordinating causes, funding campaigns, and protecting the public work attached to the crown. Control of it meant influence far beyond a single title. Anne listened without interrupting. Then the Princess Royal slid her memorandum toward Charles and said she could not support the proposal. A memorandum was a formal written argument used to record concerns and guide a decision, and hers left no room for misunderstanding. She told him the foundation belonged to the family's service, not to the emotional needs of any one marriage. Charles stiffened. Camilla lowered her eyes, but her silence carried anger. Charles asked the question that had been waiting beneath every polite sentence. Did Anne believe Camilla was unworthy? His voice remained controlled, yet the hurt was unmistakable. The Princess Royal answered that worthiness was not the issue. Trust was. Procedure was. Power was. She warned that placing too much authority in one household would weaken the foundation and turn every future decision into a test of personal loyalty. Camilla finally spoke. The Queen Consort accused Anne of hiding a personal rejection behind the language of governance. She said years of service were being dismissed because some members of the family still refused to accept her fully. Anne did not raise her voice. She reached into her folder and produced the altered St. James's program, the document that had announced Camilla's future leadership before approval existed. William could no longer remain silent. The prince confirmed that he had also seen the program and could not support the appointment without an independent review, meaning an examination conducted outside the households involved. Charles stared at his son, stunned that the future king had known and said nothing. Sophie watched the monarch's expression change as anger gave way to betrayal. Charles pushed back his chair and declared the meeting over. He took Anne's memorandum with him. At the doorway, she called him by his first name and said she had never wanted to hurt him. The king stopped, but he did not turn around. The family confrontation was finished. The battle for control had only begun. Once the doors closed, the dispute changed shape. It was no longer merely Charles against Anne or Camilla against her critics. Trustees began reviewing authority. Secretaries searched through old statutes. William studied the risks of intervention, while Sophie tried to prevent the family from splitting into permanent camps. Yet the person with the greatest power was also the most wounded. The king could force the appointment forward, but doing so might prove every warning his sister had placed before him. Charles understood that royal influence had limits, even when the monarch wanted a particular outcome. The Foundation's charter, a formal document setting out how the organization must be governed, required its board of trustees to approve any permanent family chair. He could pressure the process, but he could not safely ignore it. Forcing Camilla into the role could trigger resignations, public questions, and accusations that the charity existed to serve one household rather than the causes it claimed to protect. The trustees moved quickly after receiving Anne's memorandum. They called an emergency review to examine the altered ceremony program and the proposed transfer of patronages between royal households. Those patronages were official relationships between royals and charitable organizations, carrying influence, funding, and public attention. Changing them without consent could weaken Catherine, Edward, and others, while placing unprecedented control inside Camilla's office. Charles read Anne's document again in private. The king circled a sentence warning that independence would become meaningless if approval followed decisions already made. Then he reached the final page and saw William's written endorsement beneath the argument. The prince had not merely understood his aunt's concerns, he had formally supported them. Charles set down his pen, wounded by the silence of the son he expected to stand beside him. Camilla entered and immediately sensed the change. The queen consort asked whether he still intended to support her appointment. Charles hesitated. It lasted only a few seconds, but that pause destroyed the certainty he had given her. She looked toward the desk and noticed her proposal folder was no longer at its center. He had placed it inside a closed drawer. Camilla touched the handle, then withdrew her hand without opening it. Sophie carried even darker news. During a private conversation, the trusted confidant met the senior trustee, who warned that 3 board members would resign if the appointment moved forward without a full vote. Such departures would turn a family disagreement into a public institutional crisis. She also learned that Anne had refused to campaign for herself or nominate a replacement, making it harder to accuse the Princess Royal of seeking control. Charles summoned William that evening and ordered that Camilla not be told until they had spoken. The king was considering a retreat he once believed impossible. The Foundation's rules had restrained the crown, but the consequences were about to become painfully personal. Camilla did not learn that her plan was collapsing through an official announcement. She discovered it through absence. A meeting vanished from her schedule. Trustees stopped calling her office. Documents that had once arrived for approval were redirected elsewhere. Then Charles entered her sitting room, without the proposal in his hands. Before he spoke, she understood. The role she believed would secure her place in the family was slipping away, and the man who had promised to defend it looked defeated. Charles told her the foundation review had frozen every leadership change. The review was a formal examination of how the charity had handled its decisions, and until it ended, no new appointment could proceed. Camilla's briefing with senior staff had been cancelled. Every patronage arrangement had returned to its earlier structure, meaning the queen consort no longer had any temporary authority over the family's shared charitable work. Camilla asked whether he still intended to fight for her. The king answered that he could not force the appointment while the board remained divided. She then asked the question he had been avoiding. Did he agree with Anne? Charles looked away and said the situation was more complicated than agreement or disagreement. His refusal to give her a clear answer wounded her more deeply than a simple yes. Anne returned to her regular engagements without celebration. The Princess Royal refused congratulatory messages from staff and warned that no one should describe the outcome as a victory over Camilla. William issued the same instruction to his household, telling the prince's aides that public triumph would turn a governance dispute into an attack on the queen. Both understood that humiliation could make the family division permanent. Camilla removed the foundation speech from her desk. The queen consort had prepared it for the day her appointment was meant to become official, filling its pages with promises of unity and shared purpose. She placed the document inside a drawer and told Charles that she had mistaken his support for a guarantee. He tried to explain, but she said his hesitation had already explained enough. Sophie then delivered the evidence that changed everything. The trusted confidant had discovered organizational charts prepared by Camilla's office, with the Queen's name placed above every royal patronage division. Those charts showed that staff had begun planning the transition before formal approval existed. Charles studied them in silence, forced to accept that his wife's household had behaved as though the decision was already settled. After the king left, Camilla removed one handwritten page from her unused speech and tore it once down the middle. She stopped before destroying the rest. Charles requested a private meeting with Anne at Balmoral. No spouses, no advisors, no heirs. The public battle had been stopped, but only a brother and sister could decide whether the deepest wound would heal or harden. There were no aides in the room. No briefing papers were arranged between them. Charles stood by the window while Anne remained near the door, each waiting for the other to speak first. For the first time since the rejection, they were not king and princess royal. They were a wounded brother and a determined sister, confronting the possibility that duty had damaged something neither title could repair. What passed between them would decide more than the foundation. It would decide whether trust survived. Charles had removed every document before Anne arrived. Balmoral was meant to quiet the dispute, not turn it into another hearing. The king began with the question he had carried since Windsor. Would she have opposed the proposal if anyone other than Camilla had been nominated? He needed to know whether his sister had rejected a dangerous structure or the woman he had spent years defending. Anne answered without hesitation. She distrusted the way Camilla's office had advanced the plan, but she had not rejected the queen consort as a person. The Princess Royal said she would have challenged William, Catherine, or even herself if any household tried to claim authority before approval. Her objection was about control, because once the foundation belonged to one branch of the family, every charity decision could become a private command. Charles finally admitted what the role had meant to him. He had supported it because he wanted Camilla protected after years of hostility, comparison, and suspicion. The monarch believed a permanent position would prove that his marriage was no longer something the family merely tolerated. Anne's refusal had made him feel that the people closest to him still saw his wife as a permanent liability. Anne stepped closer and offered him the original ceremony program. The document still carried Charles's untouched approval notes, showing exactly what he had authorized before Camilla's announcement was inserted. The later wording had not come from him. His authority had been used to create momentum for a decision that had never been completed, and the proof left him with nowhere to hide from the truth. Charles read the program slowly. The king admitted the process had been compromised, though he told Anne that her delivery at Windsor had been harsher than necessary. She accepted that judgment, but reminded him that quiet warnings had already failed. He then acknowledged that forcing the appointment forward would damage Camilla, weaken the crown, and make every future charitable decision look politically arranged. Charles made his choice. He would withdraw the proposal himself, but he asked Anne to stand beside him when the family was informed, so the decision could not be presented as Camilla's humiliation. Before she left, The king reached for his sister's hand and said she could have warned him sooner. Anne answered that she had tried, but he had been listening as a husband before listening as king. Their trust had survived. Now the monarchy had to face the world, and the world was already preparing its verdict. By dawn, the family's private rupture had become a national spectacle. Newspapers turned a governance dispute into a royal showdown. Broadcasters replayed old images of Anne and Camilla, while commentators argued over loyalty, ambition, and the limits of a monarch's power. Yet one moment captured the public mood more powerfully than any headline: a crowd gathering outside Buckingham Palace, watching the announcement appear on their phones, then falling into an uneasy silence as the scale of the division became clear. Charles had withdrawn Camilla's nomination. The palace confirmed that the foundation would remain under an independent rotating council, a shared leadership system in which royal patrons and trustees would take turns overseeing its work, rather than allowing one household to control it. The official statement stressed unity, transparency, and continued service. It did not say Anne had defeated the king. It did not say the queen consort had been punished. Every word was chosen to prevent a family wound from becoming a constitutional humiliation. The headlines were less restrained. One fictional front page declared, "Anne stands firm, king withdraws Camilla foundation plan," beneath an image of Charles leaving Windsor with his eyes lowered, while the Princess Royal entered another vehicle. The story spread quickly because it touched two powerful emotions at once: admiration for duty and sympathy for a man forced to retreat from a promise made to his wife. Charles watched the television coverage alone. Presenters described the decision as a painful surrender and questioned whether the monarch had lost control of his own family. Sophie entered quietly when the discussion turned cruel toward Camilla. The trusted confidant lowered the volume and reminded him that public judgment was often loudest before the full truth was understood. He did not answer. He simply continued watching. Anne faced a different kind of pressure. Outside a scheduled engagement, supporters praised the Princess Royal for standing firm, but she refused to respond. She told an aide that no one should celebrate a decision that had caused her brother genuine pain. Her victory, if it could be called one, had protected the foundation, while leaving the family more fragile than before. The crowd outside Buckingham Palace revealed that division clearly. One woman held a small sign reading, "Service before status." Another called for compassion for the king, insisting that Charles had been forced to choose between marriage and duty. Neither side shouted the other down. The silence between them said more than anger could. Camilla walked past the evening broadcast without looking at it. The queen consort did not pause when her name was mentioned. Charles watched her leave, removed his glasses, and closed his eyes. The family then assembled for a private statement from the monarch. The public had delivered its judgment, but the final verdict belonged to the king, and this time, he would speak without defending the plan that had divided them. Charles entered the final family meeting, carrying no proposal, no defense, and no expectation that the damage could simply be erased. Camilla sat at his side, composed but visibly distant. Anne waited across from them, neither triumphant nor apologetic. William and Sophie remained silent, as the king delivered the decision that would define the crisis. The foundation would not belong to one household. No appointment would proceed without independent consent. And loyalty to the monarchy, he declared, could never require silence when its integrity was at risk. Charles formally confirmed that Camilla would not lead the family foundation. A rotating council, a shared leadership group designed to prevent control from resting with one household, would guide its future, bringing together Anne, William, Sophie, Edward, and independent trustees. The king also introduced safeguards preventing any royal office from changing speeches, patronage structures, leadership announcements, or organizational plans before full approval. The rules were clear, because the damage had shown exactly what happened when private certainty moved faster than public duty. Camilla listened without interrupting. The queen consort finally said she accepted the decision, but she could not pretend the experience had left her unchanged. She had believed the appointment would prove her position was secure. Instead, its collapse had reminded her how quickly acceptance could feel conditional. Charles heard the pain beneath her restraint, yet he did not reverse himself. For the first time, he allowed duty to stand where reassurance once would have been. Anne answered carefully. The Princess Royal said rejecting the proposal had never meant rejecting Camilla's place beside Charles. She then offered to work with her on a separate literacy initiative with clearly defined authority and independent approval. The gesture was not surrender. It was recognition that service could continue without control becoming personal. Charles then revealed through a recorded family statement that he had considered overruling the trustees after the first Windsor meeting. The king abandoned that idea only after studying Anne's original program and the unauthorized organizational charts from Camilla's office. Those documents proved that defending the appointment would weaken the crown he believed he was protecting. William also faced his failure. The prince privately apologized to his father for withholding what he knew before the confrontation. He still supported Anne's argument, but admitted that silence had made Charles feel betrayed. The apology did not erase the wound, yet it allowed trust to begin rebuilding. When the meeting ended, Charles remained seated. Anne approached Camilla and offered her hand. The queen hesitated, then accepted it. The gesture did not erase the conflict, but it ended the war. Anne's refusal broke Charles's heart, because it forced him to separate love from duty. Camilla lost the role, but not her place. Anne prevailed, but never celebrated. The monarchy survived because one sister said no, one king listened, and one queen accepted that dignity could not be secured through authority alone. Charles left heartbroken, but the crown left stronger. That was the painful price of duty. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.